I've just got off the back of recording a fantastic episode with Cam Hauser. We spoke all about how to get comfortable on video, a little bit about Zoom facilitation, which is the thing that he's usually known for, but we also kind of got probably halfway through a little bit esoteric. We started disagreeing a little bit on some stuff. We spoke about nuance, all kinds of stuff. This episode was great. Cam Hauser is an awesome guy. I already want to get him back on the podcast because I think it'd be really interesting for us to have a bit of a deeper conversation about some more nuanced stuff and not just video. But if you're thinking about how you want to get more comfortable on video, what you'd even do to approach that, Cam and I have a really interesting conversation about that. And yeah, watch out for Cam's intro at the beginning of this as well, because it's something quite special. Yeah. Cue the music. Right, there we go. So let me get my bit set up as well.
Yeah. And
right, well, let's go with your fancy introduction. I'll tell you where the inspiration came from for this. I just signed up to your newsletter, and it was one of the first lines in your newsletter, and I thought, this is the perfect introduction for you to this podcast. So, right. 3. Oh, you're drinking. Right. Here we go. 1. Go on, now. Welcome to the Hauser Dome.
What's good, Craig?
Probably the most interesting introduction I've had to any of these podcast episodes.
I think that anytime we're on a Zoom call, like, it is a shame if we're not taking advantage of the medium, right? We should have walk-on music. We should have all kinds, like, Zoom sessions should be good enough that at the end of them, credits have to roll down because it's that impactful and good. That's what I think we should be doing.
Have you got some credits? Have you gone that far? Have you got like dummy credits to put at the end of your Zoom calls?
No, right now I'm trying to make them be good enough for that. That's what I do. A lot of my work is like facilitating Zoom calls, and it's just funny how much people will take your information more seriously if you take the production more seriously, which doesn't make sense, but seems to happen. So I just do what works.
It definitely happens, because I started making a couple of videos on Twitter and things like that, and I started doing a thing where I'd sometimes reply to some people's tweets with a video, just like the way that I look right now. And people are always like, oh my God, I can't believe you replied. Even though I normally would reply, just with text, I'd just tweet back at them. But they're somehow really amazed when it looks like this and it's got subtitles and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, man. You sent me a video requesting to do this podcast, and I got super hype off that. Just because that's a trick I've been doing forever. I'm really into sending videos for an audience of one person, right? For that kind of thing. And the impact it has, I think a lot back to, there was a time when getting an email was a special thing, right? You would check your email with excitement of anticipation, like maybe I got a couple emails today. And we haven't been in that era for quite a while. We're in the era where if someone sends you a video like that, it makes your day. Like you said, hey, Cam, I wanted to know if you've been on a podcast. I was like, I don't know. I just got hype watching it. So salute. And I agree 100% that responding to things with videos is a really cool thing to do.
So quick 30-second background, because I don't like doing loads of background stuff on these kind of things. But you mentioned the Zoom videos, and you've been doing it for a long time. How has that kind of manifested itself in kind of the business world of what you do?
I'll try to condense it down to 30 seconds. It's a long, novel length story, but I spent a decade, I founded this company called 3-Day Startup. That's a startup bootcamp style program. And that involved facilitation. That involved guiding a group of people through a process. And at the end of that process, we wanted them creating startups that actually worked. And I learned a lot about that in person, but I grew this company and it was awesome to scale it and went like all over the world. It still exists. It's doing great. But the logistics of moving people around took forever. I started doing online facilitation in 2018, but I was pretty bad at it. But I think that once we can make online Zoom facilitation, Zoom experiences good enough in Zoom that you don't always need to jump on a plane to be with someone, we're just cracking open something really powerful as far as how human beings collaborate. And so that's my interest in this. And a lot of this kind of work that I do for corporates or universities, whatever, is just trying to make sure that magical things are happening inside of a Zoom room.
Yeah, I've been in so many Zoom meetings over this last year. I can count on one hand the amount of physical meetings I've had. I cannot count on my pair of hands how many Zoom meetings I've had, and how many kind of horror stories I've had where I've had to give presentations and there's just a wall of 20 people really kind of thinking about what I'm saying. But it's a weird scenario, isn't it, to be able to kind of perform in that environment when you're used to doing it in person.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two ways to look at this. The first one is that it's just unnatural. It is a very unnatural thing to interact with someone in this way. There's something called Zoom zombie face, which is like you're running a session with a group of people and they look like this. It doesn't mean you're actually doing a bad job, because if you were in person, they would never do that. That's rude. But this is a new thing for us as a species. So we haven't really gotten acculturated to the point to where we just know that to be a little bit more alert. So I'd run some sessions where I felt like I was just crushing. I was just amazing. And a couple of people in the grid, they looked like they were falling asleep. And so I checked in with them after, like, hey, was that okay? And they said, no, that was great. That was the most fun I've ever had in a Zoom room. And so I'm asking, well, then why did you look like you hated me? And that was the beginning of me realizing that this was a thing. So that's like, I think we're just still getting used to this. But I also think that Zoom and breakout rooms in general are vastly underrated as a tool for human beings to do interesting stuff, to make friends. Like I think that what's going to be interesting is that friendships are shifting to the beginning of most friendships is going to shift to, it's going to start online. And the next place it'll go, it will be Zoom. And then from Zoom, people will meet in real life. And I think what's interesting is that this is already how the dating world works. Like the dating world shifted on this. And usually I think sex is a big driver of innovation. That's why we have certain standards for DVDs and all this kind of stuff. Yes. A lot of tech comes from that motive, that kind of human desire. But I think that that shift is happening, and we're just scratching the surface on how powerful and wonderful it can be to be in a great Zoom session and feel things and have things happen to us that are more powerful than if we were actually there, right? So that's something that gets me out of bed in the morning, and I get pumped about it.
So what did you kind of change? So you said initially, you've been tweaking this kind of thing for probably the last year, even longer than that. But what are some of the like key things that you think make people interact better in a Zoom room?
Well, crisis, a global pandemic. I think human beings responding to challenge is like a great behavior change motivator. So I think that's part of it. I think that as production game steps up, that's getting us closer to it. I notice that when my production is on point, it's like walking into a meeting when your clothes fit perfectly or you're wearing your favorite shirt. And if you feel better going to that meeting, the meeting is going to go better, right? But I don't know. I think we're, at this point, I spend less time trying to make predictions and more time trying to do weird experiments. I think about what's really strange for me is I've been kind of swimming in these waters for a while, but during the pandemic, I made friends. Like I don't want to say my network grew because that sounds like a real businessy kind of thing, but I made friends. Which it took me a while to realize how weird that was, how strange it was that to make new friends in a time when most of us were really shut off, right? And I think that's just, again, us having to learn how to interact in these rooms and try this sort of things. And I like to be an early adopter around stuff. I like to experiment with certain types of things. But I don't know. I don't have a good answer. I just think that we're getting there. And I think that there is that notion of 1,000 true fans, and Lynn G, I don't know, she has this thing about the 100 true fans. You don't need 1,000 true fans. You just need 100 fans who will pay $1,000 for your work. And I think there's something to be said for whatever it is you're making. If you're doing something that ain't for everybody, good interactions online and in Zoom mean that those people spread about the world. Well, Zoom can solve that, right? It can give the platform to do that. And I think when people complain about Zoom fatigue, that just means they're in situations and sessions where the people in charge of running it aren't doing a good job. And they need to step their game up. They need to learn how to do this, which I think is very, very learnable. So,
yeah, I think it's some of those kind of things I was thinking of. So some of the things that spring to mind is being a little bit more animated than you maybe normally would be in person, because you've kind of got to compensate for the distance and the fact that you're digital rather than in person, and making sure you keep your voice interesting as well, going up and down and changing the cadence and things like that. I think a lot of, because I've been podcasting for quite a while, a lot of those skills have naturally gone over to another medium, which is Zoom a lot of the time, or video. And I wonder what you think about those kind of things. How much importance, because I know you've got the minimum viable video thing, right. How much of an importance do you put on those kind of things as well, being interesting really on video?
Okay, so that's a fantastic question. I think there's like the skill layer of it, which is to your point, experiment with cadence and be more animated, that sort of stuff. But I think the other layer of the more you can be you and let yourself come through, the better your stories will be and the better the Zoom experience will be. So a lot of it's just us finding our own lane. And yeah, my course, Minimum Viable Video, is we do Zoom stuff in there, but it's mainly my belief is that we're going to be like the video message you sent me to get on this podcast. I think we all are going to be learning that stuff. I think video is a language that if you're a knowledge worker, you need to be able to speak. And part of that's just doing it a lot. I actually want to throw a question back to you real quick. You getting good at podcasting, was that dedicated effort, or was it just doing lots and lots of podcasts? Like, did you study how to speak, or did you just do a lot and try along the way?
No, I just did a hell of a lot of them. So I did one a day for a year, every single day. I ended up not doing one every single day. I think I ended up doing, it was 340 or something out of 365 days. I'm pretty chuffed with that. So I didn't study anybody in particular, and I wasn't actively, watching good speeches or any of this kind of thing. But I think the regular daily practice, I think there's two things to it that I attribute to improving, was the regular daily practice, but also listening back to my own voice as well. And here it's a little bit like looking in the mirror naked. You're hearing yourself every day, how terrible you sound, how rushed you sound, or how fast you're talking, or how indecipherable you are, or how weak you sound. Weak's maybe the wrong word, but not confident, basically.
Yeah.
And when you hear that over and over, you kind of start wanting to improve it a little bit, and that's just what happened. Every day I listened to myself, didn't like it. And I think Robbie Crabtree, when I had him on the podcast, he said it in one of the best ways I've heard. At first, when you start practicing speaking or anything, you hate the way that you sound. And then over time, you get used to hearing your voice. And then the third level is you fall in love with your own voice. And when you get to that point, it's easier because you can play with the way that you sound and be very intentional with it. I think at the end of that, I'd almost got to that point where you've heard yourself so many times, you kind of fall in love with it a little bit. It sounds a little bit egotistical, but yeah, I didn't do any formal practice. Do you do any kind of formal practice or study or?
Well, if I sum up my entire pedagogical approach to learning video, whether it's facilitating Zoom or it's just learning how to get good on camera and make video, it's just 3 words. It's make more videos. That's it. So that is far and away my kind of number one thing. So certainly aligned. I do think it's worth practicing, but I think of it less about practice in the sense that you go in the gym and you get your reps in. I think that's just like, I don't try. I'll do 10 exercises to improve the cadence of my voice. I don't think about that.
Yeah.
What I try more is just experimenting more around, what if we tried this? What if we tried that? And I don't give people any warning. I like to volunteer as a mentor for lots of courses and things like that. So I'm in environments where I'm not getting paid to be there. And if I'm not getting paid and I'm there as a volunteer, I can do guinea pig stuff. I can try interesting things about getting people to interact and testing this kind of stuff. I think that it's not weird to say, like, I get why you might feel it's egotistical to fall in love with the sound of your own voice, but I think that should be the goal. And I wish that more people were in love with the sound of their own voice. They're not, but I think they should be. A student had this happen in MVV the other day. Same thing with editing videos. It's not too dissimilar from podcasts, right? And this particular brand of podcast, you're seeing video, right? Yeah. You are seeing yourself and hearing yourself. And yeah, the first reaction is always horror. That is, oh my God, other human beings have to see this all the time. I am sorry that I'm inflicting this upon the world, right? And the second one, I think, yeah, it's tolerance. It's okay, well, whatever. But exactly, once you start to like the sound of your own voice and notice your mannerisms and how you carry yourself on camera, that's when the kind of shock is out of there. And now you can begin to really understand what's going on. And I'm a slow learner. So the first time I do anything doesn't count. That's too much me adjusting, getting used to whatever it is. But later down the road, that's when I can start iterating and improving. And that just comes naturally. Like it's hard not to do that if you spend a lot of time just filming videos, getting used to it, getting used to the process, talking on camera. And I think all this stuff is learnable too. The thing that bugs me is a lot of people think this stuff it's binary. You either have this or you don't. And I think things like charisma are very, very learnable. You just have to be open to experimenting and looking dumb, which is hard. Right?
I 100% agree, because I am not a natural. I am quite extroverted, but I am not a natural person who would jump up onto the stage and be the life and soul of the party. I do enjoy meeting people. I get energy from that kind of environment, but I wouldn't be the person who put myself forward to be on a TV show or something like that. And when you say this is very learnable, I 100% agree, because that is what I did. I've just done so many looking at camera, piece to camera videos, so many podcasts, so many talking to people, so many, all these little parts of kind of being good on video that they all mush together at some point, and it looks like it's really easy. And that, truthfully, is because it is easy at that point, purely because you've done thousands of them. You've, like you said, been bad for a really long time. Unfortunately, that isn't the thing that people want to hear, is it?
Yeah.
They want the tips. They want you should speak like this, or you should do the introduction like this. They want the 1, 2, 3 step guide.
Yeah.
To it.
We always want that. And that's part of what minimum viable video is. It's this, and I state it in a way that oversimplifies in the same way that the 1, 2, 3 tips simplifies it. But I kind of say that there's you at home in your bedroom or in your garage or whatever filming. And then there's hitting publish on something to YouTube, which again, your fear is that the whole world is going to see it and laugh at you. When of course the big problem is that no one's going to see it at all. And part of what minimum viable video is this middle ground, so that you can come in here, be with other like-minded people who feel the same way you do. They don't feel like they're naturally just magnetic on camera. And we all get to get together and you get to make videos that you share, again, within these circles, right? Because if you try to learn how to make content, your friends are going to be like really great at giving you advice and feedback the first couple times, and then they're not going to care. And so it's just nice to find a community of people that you can experiment with that, and where it's safe to try the weird stuff, because everything feels weird when you're just getting started out, for sure.
Yeah. And I think how this podcast came about, so I think we followed each other on Twitter. I know I've followed you on Twitter for a while, but we never really chatted. Hold on, I'm losing my voice. We never really chatted, and then I did a workshop on Andrew Barry's On Deck course, and you asked a couple of questions, and I thought, the way that you asked them and the way that you spoke and the way that essentially you presented yourself and you were on camera, I thought that's an interesting guy. That's someone who I think would be good on the podcast. And just in that one instance, you made another connection with somebody for an opportunity to go on somebody's podcast. And that all comes down to being comfortable to some extent, being comfortable on camera, but also being comfortable in yourself to very well articulate, although I didn't articulate that very well, to articulate your points very well. And I knew that you were someone with intention who'd have something to say on the podcast. So I think the skills go even wider than we can possibly even think.
For sure. And I think, again, I really liked your presentation, and I thought crap was a pretty elegant encapsulation of things that I'm not fluent about. And so it's just really useful for me to get this in a framework that I could immediately start doing things with. But I think that, yeah, camera confidence and presence, and even like having a podcast or making videos, you're not only winning when you have 1 million subscribers, right? You are winning when you have things that reflect who you are, and they're lighthouses. Those are beacons so other people can see if they connect. So like when I saw your talk, I was like, that told me a lot about you. I was like, all right, I want to get to know this guy. I want to chat with this guy. I like his worldview and what he's done. And it's something that your parents telling you that, like, wait till people just get to know you and they'll know how great you are. Like, that doesn't work in the modern era. Like, I think that even if you don't really identify as a content creator, it's valuable to have a few things that are out there that are decent reflections of you and your worldview, right? And they don't need to attract everyone, by the way. Part of their job is for people to see this and say, I don't think I would work well with that person, or I don't think that's someone that would do well in my friend group. But I think we're very much hitting that point where there's just too many people. We have way past Dunbar's number, and that there's a lot of value in having content like that you share. And that's part of my love of video, is that video is the closest thing we have to cloning ourselves, right? When I make a video that is about an idea that I care about, and let's say I deliver it well. Let's say that on that particular day, my smile is good, my words are coming out nicely. Well, it captured it. It is frozen in amber. And so now when people ask me questions, if I'm not feeling it that day, I can just send them to the video, right? That video captures me at a good point. And so I think there's something to be said for having some content that's just like spread around that is a good reflection of who you are. And that is where we're going, as opposed to everyone needs to have, 1 million subscribers and be internet famous, that sort of thing. I just think that's where we're going. And that's part of what MVV is about, is to give people a chance to experiment and explore that with others, just because I think we really need others to make that happen. We need feedback from people to figure out what we're doing, whether it works or not.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've been trying to do the same on Twitter with sharing stupid little dumb videos, because it is the quickest way for you to either decide that you hate me or decide that you want to continue following. I do think there's a bit of power in that, but I think the reason that most people probably won't do it is because they don't want to find out. They don't want to know that somebody doesn't want to interact with them.
Yeah. Well, I actually want to go down this road a little bit deeper, because the thing about learning video is the camera lens is in many ways a mirror where you just get to look right back at yourself and see stuff that we don't always want to see. Like, you clearly have a voice. I have a voice too. I have a voice that I cultivated because I'm old and because I've failed plenty. But I'm curious, where did your voice come from? How did you find it? How did you get the worldview that you have? And feel free to say, Cam, I don't have a worldview, I'm just winging it. But I'm curious about how you put together your take on things.
Oh, God. I guess some element of it is age as well. I'm 33, so I've been doing a couple of things for over a decade. So that's where some of the worldview comes from. A big string through everything that I've done ever since I've had a serious career, since 18 years old, as being a designer, was doing challenges, doing things daily. That's been a big driver in everything that I've done. I would never have expected the thing that I get the most comments about all of the time is my voice. And I honestly don't, that's not something I've ever cultivated. I used to hate drama at school and things like that. I would have never have thought I would have been in this kind of situation where people would have been saying that kind of thing. It's just that I've got a deep voice, to some extent. I've got a deep voice, and the accent that I've got, which is a Yorkshire accent, is considered one of the friendliest accents in the UK as well. that helps. So that's kind of accidental. And the way that I speak came from working with a lot of people kind of globally who didn't really understand the local accent that we've got. So my accent is quite clipped, but there's still some kind of weird words, and I say some things in strange ways that people might not understand, like whenever I extend my vowels and things like that. So coat instead of saying coat, and boat instead of saying boat, and things like that. So there's a kind of weird quirks to it. So in terms of where it came from, the only thing in terms of worldview that I have is doing things daily. That is I haven't got any other worldview. I am curious about lots of different things. I love meeting people. The only other thing I always say is work hard and be nice to people. They are the only kind of worldview elements that I have. None of it is intentional. I'd hope that I do a pretty good job of showing that I am winging it, and that goes through everything that I do. I do something whilst I enjoy it, and when I don't enjoy it, I stop. And it's only been in this last year where I decided to put a stake in the ground and say I'm going to be on Twitter intentionally that I've started to build some kind of awareness around the things that I do. But there was no grand plan. There still remains to be no grand plan. There is an element of leaning into some of the things that I've gotten pretty good at, which is podcasting. Podcasting is a big part of a lot of what I do these days, but it still doesn't make me any money. All the rest of the stuff is still the money, the agency and things like that.
Yeah, I think that in some sense, your Yorkshire accent, which is cool to know where it's actually from, it's cool, it's unique, and it's singular, again, in a global context. I know if you walk down the street, everybody talks like you, but for the rest of us, it's something special. And to me, it sounds kind of like, why do a lot of tall people like basketball? Well, tall people start playing basketball at an early age, and because they're tall, they get a few more rebounds, they start to get this positive reinforcement. And next thing you know, some tall people like basketball. You have a cool voice that is unique and special. So I think, in a sense, that kind of made podcasting make sense for you. But it also sounds like you have, again, an action bias. You're someone who will try things. And that's something that I take a lot of. I'm also very much wired that way, because I just found myself in a lot of situations where I wasn't as talented or not as smart as some of the people there. Same. And I realized pretty early on that I would try it. I didn't mind embarrassing myself as much, and I became comfortable flailing. And then, of course, you learn the big secret of the world, that everybody's flailing and that no one knows what they're doing. Yeah. But it's one of those things where, again, the action bias sounds like it's pretty strong. And I think that takes a lot of confidence to try. So it just sounds like you were kind of, in a sense, you'd been cultivating this thing for a while and trending in this way of, I'm going to do things. And what's so amazing is that, there's always people smarter than you, but a lot of them aren't doing. A lot of them are just deep on Netflix right now. And that's what I think is so powerful with this. And back to your point about the podcasting isn't making you money, but I guarantee you that something that someone said in a podcast, you have dropped in a client meeting that made them think you were insightful. And there's probably been a few people who, I don't know what your numbers are on the podcast, but again, these are records of your thoughts. But this conversation is more valuable to both of us, the fact that it's happening publicly, right? Absolutely. It's one more rep for us to get a little practice doing it. There might be some people who find it, and either one of them kind of comes our way. But I just think a lot of people aren't even thinking this way and even trying this kind of stuff. And they're only thinking that they should do a podcast if they can hit Joe Rogan level, right? And I don't think that's really how it works at all.
I completely agree with you. I don't see it as a money maker. I make the money on the agency, and I love doing that, and I enjoy doing that. And this is a hobby, and it'll probably stay like that for who knows. I hope it always stays like that. And you're right about dropping things in client meetings. That will have absolutely have happened, because everything that I do, and it wasn't me that realized this thought, but this was something that Bram said to me a while ago when I was on his podcast. He said, a thing that a lot of people ask me is, how do you do all the things that you do? Because you do lots of different stuff. You're on Twitter, you're doing podcast videos. They don't seem to make sense. Why are you doing all those things? And I didn't really have an answer. I'm curious. I just enjoy doing them. I have a bias for action, those kind of things. And he summed it up really nicely. And this is to your point, that he said everything you do is kind of sharing an idea and crystallizing an idea and pushing an idea further. So I'll get an idea for something, a thought that I have. It might be about a particular topic, and I'll tweet it, and then maybe I'll podcast about it. Then maybe I'll get somebody on the podcast to have a long-form conversation about it. And all those reps there help crystallize my worldview on that individual topic, which then makes me better in many other mediums as well. And it's like this big circle that just keeps going around and around and around and around, almost like a flywheel that just helps me improve my ideas on lots of different topics. And then when I finally have the idea fully crystallized, I might end up making a visual out of it. And that visual might do pretty well because I've crystallized the idea and I've thought about it in a long form medium quite a lot. You're absolutely right. I don't think many podcasts are really going to get to that point of being at a kind of Joe Rogan level, and I'm not sure whether I even would want to desire that. I think that there's value in being small and having a small audience and being able to be truly you and being able to share you kind of authentically as well, because you get to that level and think there's a lot of pressure on those kind of things. I always like to think about this idea of making your own TV channel, and that's ultimately what I'm trying to do. It was a Gary Vaynerchuk idea where everything you make is just revealing another little part of your personality, and they all compound together, don't they? So when a client finally does come to you, I don't know, say they Google your name or they go to YouTube and they put your name in YouTube and 100 results come back of you on camera having a conversation like this. It's so powerful, so powerful.
Well, I think that's also why personal newsletters are a big deal. Like, I love it that personal newsletters have blown up and that corporate newsletters are on the decline, in the sense that people want to know a little bit about the person they're going to work with. So when they watch those podcasts of yours, they're getting a sense of your personality, and a good newsletter does the same thing. And it's part of the reason why I do video is that I can capture my personality really well on video. Video makes it a little easier to do that. I find writing incredibly difficult to condense my ideas in elegant ways. And so it's just an entire struggle. But yes, they go find it. Also, the fact that you have 100 podcasts or however many you have, that is an immediate signal of, look how serious this person is about this hobby. And if they're that serious about that, I bet I can trust them on the work that is their passion, right?
Oh man, if they'd seen my bank balance as well about the stuff that I've spent on podcasting, they'd know I was deadly serious on this thing. Yeah, I agree with you. It is a signal in lots of different ways. And I think that's part of why being so consistent and being so prolific is so powerful as well. I was talking about this earlier just today on a Twitter Spaces thing with Jamie Russo about this idea of not building a personality based on being known for one particular thing. So not being known as a designer or being known as a writer or all those things. Being known as for the traits that you portray the most, because I think that there's a lot more power in that across trying to entice clients to work with you, across making friends on the internet, across kind of any medium. If you can somehow, and I haven't really codified any of this or how you could actually do it, but if you can somehow make the biggest part of you marketing is the traits of your personality that you want to elevate, that's like a superpower on the internet these days. Yeah.
There's a term called parasocial, and a parasocial relationship is when someone, from watching your videos and listening to your podcast, feels like they know you, feels like they have that connection with you as if they were your friend just from the content you provided. And I think that's like super interesting. I found that even at a small scale. So like when the government of Paraguay or whatever, like asked me to build some entrepreneurship program for them, and I do, and it's got my videos and I'm making there's stories in there, and I'm telling stories of my own life. I'm making sure that it's not just a textbook, right? When I meet those folks in a conference or something like that, they walk up to me and they know my name and they tell me about this thing that I have no idea what they're talking about, but it's from when they watch the video, right? It's that notion. I think it's why video is really powerful. But as far as the traits angle, I don't know about that. Like, I feel like I need to make sure that people know that I'm capable of like 1, 2, 3 things. And if I'm funny or if I'm engaging, those things will be nice. But to me, that sounds like I'm competing with comedians, which I'm not that funny. So that's something I don't think about much, but I do feel like there's an Overton window that most people have about an individual person. And as much as human beings contain multitudes, on a relative standpoint, most people can't understand. I mean, human beings can't remember more than 7-digit phone numbers, right? So I don't think they can remember the 7 unique things about someone else. I think they have as much room for us as 1 or 2 things. And so I think it's part of our duty is that if you're growing a brand and you need to be known for this thing, you want whatever those 2 things are to be aligned with whatever it is you're building. This is all just off the cuff. Once I have like endless audience, then I'll be able to tell you if it's true or not. But that's my thinking so far.
No, it's interesting to talk about it because this kind of ties in with another idea that I've been thinking a lot about lately, and I've just done a quick podcast on my email newsletter about nuance, and the fact that we can have a discussion about this in long form here on a podcast, and this is being recorded and we're going to publish it. I think that's really interesting because we wouldn't be able to have this same conversation on Twitter, for example. I would say something like I just said, whereas I would word it in a way where I was correct as well, because that's the way that you need to word it on Twitter, a polarizing fashion. I'd say something like, you need to make your personality the most important part of your brand or whatever. Full stop. That's it. The statement is there. That's it. And very few people would ever respond to that. You probably wouldn't reply and go, Craig, I don't think you're right about that, because it just comes across as a bit dickish on Twitter, doesn't it? So you just don't respond. You just don't say that. Whereas in this kind of scenario, we can actually have a conversation about it. And I worry that we're losing some of that, particularly as we're all trying to build a little bit on Twitter. And this is where I think personal newsletters as well are important too, where we can provide nuance in some kind of places. What do you think about that? It's a very nuanced idea. I know it's a very woolly and strange topic.
My first reaction is one of a sad disagreement that human beings are not capable of nuance. And
you think they're not capable of seeing a nuanced argument either?
I think some are, but I think that our brains were not meant to process this much information. And this is why I'm actually excited about personal knowledge management. And the more that Roam and Notion and Evernote and all these companies help human beings make sense of this influx of information, the better we'll be able to manage that stuff. But I think nuance, understanding different points of view, is it's just amazing to me how many people are not really open to that. I think that like you and I are also, like, there was enough commonalities that we were probably going to agree on a lot of topics. But on a global scale, I think there is a lot of disagreement. I think we have to kind of accept the idea that, like, what is truth anymore? What is reality, right? What do we as culturally, like, what can we agree on? Because that's not always, I think you and I probably agree on a ton of things. But, you know, globally, if you pair up some random person from wherever, does that happen? I think that I'd like to believe there's room for nuance. My hunch is that if you're trying to build something really big, you have to get used to people knowing you for 1 or 2 things. And again, most people, I think your inner circle will know you for you and what you're about. But, you know, if you think of some random musician, like effectively everyone's a one-hit wonder. I think people have enough room to understand one song from that band. And that's like for the average person who's not a fan, that's what they're going to get. And I think the beauty, like maybe a more optimistic take on this, is that the beauty of the internet means that we get to find the people who we get to know every song they make. We get to find people who we like all the sides of them and all their different ideas. But I'm a guest instructor on Ali Abdal's YouTube course. And his basic premise is make stuff, niche down to blow up, make stuff that is incredibly specific to serve a lot of people. And then once you get them all, then you can start letting more of your personality through. Then you can be a little bit weirder and they'll be there for you. But in the beginning, they're only going to be there for whatever utility and value you can provide. I think that makes sense. I am just like throwing my personality out there. I feel like if I can just be myself and be totally authentic, then that'll be the litmus test. People will like it or they won't. But it means I don't ever have to fake it or try, right? I can always just be whoever the hell I want to be. And if it fails, then I'll maybe be in trouble. But, I think it'll work. So.
No, I 100% agree with you. And there isn't many people who agree on this topic, actually. Whenever I talk about this, specifically on Twitter, no one ever likes it or anything. It's because the idea is you become very focused on a topic, and I get the concept. It works. You become very focused on a topic, say just building a Twitter account. You only talk about that one thing, maybe a second thing, and then you build very, very quickly. You build an audience very, very quickly. But it's not the only way to do it. I think there's at least two ways to do this. There's that way where you can build an audience very, very quickly for one specific thing, which is good if you're working towards a launch of something or you want to promote something, you want to sell something, that kind of thing. But there's the other way, which I think me and you subscribe to, is that you can build slower, you can be yourself, and you're still promoting one or two things. People still know you for one or two things. But you're not so bothered about growing quickly. Therefore, you're not particularly bothered about being very specific about the content that you create. And I happen to find that a more fun approach as well. I don't find it as boring. There's no way I could talk about design all day long on Twitter and YouTube and only podcast with people who are designers and all that kind of stuff. And I just think it's a case of deciding very intentionally whether you want to grow quickly or grow slowly, and if you're comfortable with that. Because if you want to follow URI's path where it's much slower, but you want the big growth, yes, then you can't do that. But I also think there's value in the other way, having a small audience who loves you for who you are, and you can sell them anything. I know that sounds a bit cynical, but you whatever you turn your mind to, they'll be interested in. I prefer that second way. I find it more fun, more interesting.
I agree. I think the second way. I don't think I could do the first way. I don't think I care enough. And to your point about it being more fun, I'm a capitalist. I teach entrepreneurship. I believe in the power of business. But damn, if it's just making you miserable, like. I wouldn't want to. I'd probably stop doing Twitter if it felt like work, right? Yes. I want it to resonate, and I want to manage how I approach that thing. But I'm not as strategic about it as I like to be. I also find that all of my ideas need feedback from reality. I don't ever words don't elegantly tumble out of my mouth into this nicely constructed, tightly tied with a bow concept. I have some ideas that I'm just so proud of and that have made me a lot of money and they've helped a lot of people. And I love all that. All of them took so much saying them out loud and then people telling me why it was dumb or how to improve it. And so I need to share things early. That's just the only thing that works for me. I'm jealous of people who can just get it right the first time, but I've never been that type of person. So I very much depend on those feedback cycles to improve. And I also think it means that, to your point about growing slowly, it means that if the people believe in your voice, you got them, they're yours. They trust you, right? And trust doesn't scale well a lot of times. So you gotta let it go at its own pace and just take your time with it.
I think that there's an element of being comfortable in your own skin as well, isn't there? I get the sense that you're quite comfortable with yourself. You're comfortable with how you come across on video. You're showing yourself, and that's really what you want to do. I think if you're not quite sure about that, sometimes you might pick the wrong way to do it. But when you get to that point where you know who you are, you're already quite established, and you know what you want to do, it's much easier. in the early days when I was on Twitter last year, from February for a couple of months, I wasn't as confident in that. And I was trying to write really good tweets, like you're saying, wrapped up in a bow, like these perfect conceptual ideas, Jack Butcher type tweets. I don't know how he does it. He just does it just off the cuff. I was just trying to write tweets like that.
Yeah, that fucking guy. he's good. I get annoyed at how good his stuff is.
I've asked him before, how do you write these tweets? And he says, yeah, there's no plan. I'm like, fuck you.
Yeah. And I'm sure like you and I probably both have things like that we have, but it's not as public facing and immediately remunerative as what Jack does. But no, I think that's really great. I think that, I think about this a lot. Like, how did I get comfortable like this? And I think it might be a case of you ever talk to someone who's 85 years old, they give zero fucks, right? They are just like, they'll just tell you exactly what's up. And I think I'm a little bit older. I'm a 4-time entrepreneur. My first company, it was SoundCloud for sports commentary, failed. My second company was Time Hop for weddings, also failed. But my third company worked. And that was the one that I did for a decade. And in my circles, like, and in the world, like, I got known as the guy who started this company. And I try to think, would I have found this level of comfort if I hadn't gotten a win? Because in the startup game, people only remember your wins. That's one of the beautiful things about it. And I think generally people, your success is all people remember. They don't remember the things that fail. And I try to think, would I have been able to get this if I hadn't had a win, something that worked and that people knew me for? And I'm not really sure because we can't A/B test our lives, which frustrates me. But I'd like to think that I would. Then again, I'm just very aware of like the survivor bias. And, when Beyonce tells people to go follow your passion, like, no, fuck off, Beyonce. You're fucking Beyonce. Your voice is incredible. Not everyone should go become a singer because you just followed your passion, right?
Yeah.
So I try to think about this because a lot of my job is helping entrepreneurs. And so I need to understand how to talk to them and how to speak to them at the place they're coming from, right?
Yeah, it is quite interesting because when I'm talking about the Twitter thing, when I was trying to write like Jack Butcher, I tried to kind of try that for probably 4 or 5 months, and they weren't really resonating. It was a lot of effort for me. I just couldn't do it. I'm just not that kind of person. And then there was just kind of one day where I just went, fuck it, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm just going to just write nonsense or whatever. And then suddenly there was seeds of something where people started replying and commenting and saying they enjoyed it. And then I started introducing some of the videos. And then I found the thing that Jack Butcher finds really easy. He finds writing tweets really easy. I found the videos really easy. I can literally just look at the camera and record a 2-minute video off the cuff with no planning, and I can just bash them out over and over in one take. And as soon as I found that, I knew that this is the thing that I should be doing more of. But it wasn't an element of, I know I said finding, it wasn't finding your passion though. It was through lots and lots of failures, months and months of failures, and also a process. And my process was that I was determined to continue writing 10 tweets per day. And through that process of not really enjoying writing Jack Butcher style tweets, I started to realize that this wasn't the thing that I was going to write. And you're completely right with Beyonce. Yeah. She just sounds good, so it's a little bit easier. I've always found it really hard to find that for me. It's always felt hard won.
I want to know what we call what you did. That process, I think a lot about how do we try to distill that down. And what you just told me, I relate to it. I don't know how we would explain this to another person. Let's say there was like a high school kid, you an intern for your podcast, and you and I were trying to convey this idea to them. I don't know how we do that, right? It's something, try things. There's a David Perel idea of imitate, then innovate, right? And so maybe like you were imitating Jack Butcher helped you see what wasn't working, because otherwise you would have stayed in your head. So the first thing was you took action. Second thing was you copied someone. Copying didn't work. You don't have the same tools and equipment that Jack Butcher has. So in imitating, maybe that's where you started the next thing. And then somewhere something happened. But to me, this feels a little bit like the South Park, like number one sell underpants. Number two, question. Number three, profit. Like, I feel like there's a lot of things like that. And
Yes.
I feel like we're still there. We're still in the, what did you do? Because I want to know too. I have similar versions of it, and it's hard for me to put it in a process, right?
Well, the harsh truth to it all is that it's took my entire 15 years of my career to be sat at this point. So if you were to tell somebody what paths they should follow, well, for a start, you need to be born in Barnsley in the UK if you want the voice. And then you need to go away and do 360 podcasts in this location that I was sat in to get exactly the same results with my brain and my body at these exact same times. And the simple truth of it, the way I always try and look at it, I always boil it back down to the daily thing. And it sounds incredibly reductive, but I've repeated this process over and over and over for 13 years and never found a failure with it for learning something, for getting competent at something. The only problem with the process is that it's incredibly time consuming. It takes a lot of effort and most people would not be willing to do it. So just on the podcasting thing, I went into day one not even knowing how to do a podcast. And I was spending 2 to 3 hours some days learning audio production and then how do I output the file and where do I upload it. Most people don't have that time to do it. But I haven't found a thing where I have put the effort in to do a little bit every day. I guess it's the atomic habits thing. Over a long period of time, it does turn into a skill that can be used, but it isn't easy to keep the streak up. So I think my discovery is similar to yours because neither of us are naturally talented at anything, really. You kind of work a little bit harder to try and keep up, and then you eventually get to a point where you realize, oh, you look behind you and you realize there's nobody there anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're stood at the front going, I'm just a dumb guy. How did I get here? So you don't know how to word it to somebody.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, the thing that got me here was definitely not the ability to articulate it beautifully.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like before you know it, you've cultivated this weird set of intersecting skills that particular combination is not something that someone else has. And if you've been sharing it, people know you have it. I part of the reason that I love teaching people video is there's people who've built up expertise, but the only people who know it are their coworkers, maybe their family members. And there's all sorts of reasons why your boss would not want other people in the company or other people to know that you have this skill, right?
Yeah.
And so if you make videos that show you doing this, it's again, letting people know you have that. I think the publishing part is really important, but this stuff is hard. And anytime I read books about this kind of stuff, I react like, oh God, this sounds really self-helpy to a degree that I strongly am against. But this whole taking action thing, this whole, let's go try it. And honestly, let me ask you this. Did you have good peers? Did you have people doing similar stuff? Like, are you a lone weirdo, or do you have other people who, and maybe they were just people on the internet who were these like long distance mentors that you didn't actually know, but you got to follow in their footsteps in a way. Did you have people you know who did this, or did you more just see people like, I want to know, tell me about that dimension of this.
Honestly, I don't know. I've got lovely parents. They've always been very supportive. Neither of them are creative. They worked hard. I guess I get some of that from them. But all my friends don't do any of these things that I do. I have no local friends that do this kind of thing. I've, in the last year, built friends online who maybe kind of do some of these things. But I honestly don't know where it came from, where the desire came from to keep pursuing things like this, or how it even started in the first place. It just kind of happened. And I wonder about that a lot. Why I became, because my thing is the daily project thing, why I became so obsessed with them. And I always say it was because I had this obsession to be improving faster than everybody else. I always, like I said, felt like the dumb kid, because I wasn't dumb at school. I did really well at school. And I actually found normal studies passing exams very, very easy. I didn't revise for any of them, but there was always an element to me where I wanted to be better than the previous day, and I don't know where that came from. And that never left me. So I was always looking for a way to improve quicker and better and faster than everybody else. I always wanted to be better and faster than everybody else. But I don't know where it came from.
I think there might be something baked into you about tight feedback loops, in that I think that it's a struggle if the thing you're going to do is you only get one time a year to do it, right? If whatever medium you have chosen, it's a one-shot kind of deal, I think that's tough. And I think the more that you can make an approach to something where you can, again, daily progress and just tiny incremental progression, that can get very addictive, right? It is addicting to get used to just like micro improvements. And of course, then you get the compound interest of all that. So I think that's a really big deal. It's only you've chosen things that allow you to get those tight feedback loops, because a feedback loop would try like planting a seed and then it takes, months until you harvest it. That's a slower rate of learning for if you're learning how to garden properly, right? Whereas design, you can do designs quickly. Writing, you can do writing pretty rapid, right? Making a Hollywood film, a lot of directors, they get 1 or 2 shots because the amount of logistics required to get that going is slow feedback loops, right? So I think that's a dimension of it, but I don't think that's the big thing. I think the big thing, and the thing that I'm trying to dig into, is what the hell's going on inside of Craig that is moving him forward, that is keeping him moving forward. Because incremental progress, it's great, but some days you just don't effing feel like it, right? And those days, it's important to keep doing the thing. Like my lens on this is a little bit different. I have a really annoying chronic muscle issue that cropped up a couple decades ago, and it meant I had to give up a lot of, like, part of the reason I do video is I can sit in front of the camera and talk all day, but typing actually causes me pain. So I can't type as much as I'd like, and it really limits my ability to use a computer. And so because of that, I make sure that when I am using a computer, I'm getting the most out of it, right? And so as much as like I hate the idea of seeing like injuries and illnesses as like a gift, there's parts of it that are true. The constraints that they get on you do force you to move and keep going. And I think it's easier to say, I'll just do this later if everything works properly, right?
Do you also get impatient when you're working on big projects? Do you prefer to do the startup work, and do you get really excited at the beginning of a project, but do you not like seeing the detail through to the end? Are you that kind of person?
A little bit. I get really annoyed doing the stuff that, like, big corporate projects mean that you have to do them in a way that they're aligned with everything. And so there's a lot of communication that is no progress, just alignment. And that drives me nuts. So I am very much around like building things at the early stages means you can move much, much, much faster. You don't have to document everything. You don't have to worry so much about that. And I've had parts of my life, my career been around that, and it will be again, but I'm in very much as close to like pure creation as I've been in a while. And I'm really enjoying that phase of things. But I think it also speaks to, if you have good collaborators, it doesn't feel that way. When you have good collaborators, you don't feel like you're aligning. You're going, right?
Yeah. I think maybe the creation part of it's quite strong as well, because I've had a creative career for 15 years, and when I'm not doing a creative thing, I feel like I've got less energy to continue doing the other things. Like I need creativity in my life every day. I need the opportunity to make something or do something every single day. If I don't have that, I feel like there's something missing. So that manifests itself in lots of different ways, even just writing a tweet or making an image or whatever. But I kind of need that.
Hold on. So aphantasia is this term for people who can't visualize things. Let's assume that people who consider themselves not creative and they can't imagine what it's like to be creative. You said you feel like you're missing something. What are you missing when you're not having creativity being part of your life?
I've believed for a long time. Well, one thing, we're all born creative, unless we have that thing that you just said. I think as children, we're all creative, aren't we? We're making things every day. We're drawing or making cool stuff. And then it slowly starts getting beaten out of us as we get older. And I honestly feel like one of the most soulful things we can do as a human is to make something, because we can look at it and go, I've made that thing. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what's going on in your brain when you feel like that, but you feel happy when you've made the thing that's uniquely yours, and you can even sign it at the bottom and say, I've made this thing, and manifests itself in lots of different ways. But when I don't regularly do that, that's what I feel like I'm missing. I feel like I don't know, maybe it's an ego thing, Cam. Maybe that's it. Maybe I feel like I need to stamp my name on things every day. I don't know.
Maybe that's, Craig, that you want to be a god. That's what gods do. Gods create.
Maybe.
And, they like, so maybe it's your connection. A softer way of saying that is it's your connection with the divine. I have the same feeling. Like I also love making something. And I think I have this internal counter in my head of this producer consumer ratio. And for most people, right, there is no production. It's just consuming.
Yes.
And I am very deeply interested in having my producer ratio be part of that ratio being very, very high. I also think that it's obviously best if millions of people get benefit from and impact from your work. But even if no one sees it, I think there is something really sacred and powerful about just producing that thing. And to your point, signing your name on it, like you finished it, you completed an act. And a lot of my world of the entrepreneurship education side is teaching people how to pitch and get feedback from those pitches. And what's funny is sometimes, again, just saying the idea out loud themselves when they practice pitching is what improves it. Not getting feedback from investors and all these people who are going to school them on this. So I think there's something to be said for making things, even if you don't share with the world, or if you do share with the world and it falls flat. But I don't know. I also, like, one interesting question I have is, at what point do we have too many content creators? At what point do we have too many podcasters, too many video makers, too many writers? And I honestly, one, it's a stupid question because I don't think we're anywhere near there. But number two, I don't think we're ever going to have too much. Like, there already is too much. We produced too much a long time ago. So It doesn't matter. There's always room for perspectives and angles on things that other people don't have.
I think, there's kind of two levels to it. If you're approaching it with the right attitude and you are truly doing it for you, this conversation that we're having right now, this is truly for me and you. I am not even thinking about who would watch this in the future. And I genuinely believe that. And I try to approach that with everything that I do that isn't for money outside of the agency. It's for me, that's why I'm doing it. So the purely selfish attitude. And I think if you approach it that way, like you said, it doesn't matter if anybody watches it. It's the creation thing. It's signing your name on the bottom of it. Yeah. But also I think, that I don't think there'll ever be too much stuff, because I think this is one of the truly amazing things of the creator economy, that we get to have such a personalized content diet. So when we do choose to consume stuff, and I'd probably say my consumption to creation ratio is probably like 90% production and 10% consumption. Yeah. But when I do choose to consume something, I'm consuming people's newsletters that I've specifically chosen to get. I'm not watching a TV channel. I'm not watching the news or anything like that. I'm specifically crafting the things that I want to see. And there's so much power in that. And when you think of it like that, when everybody, potentially billions of people, are crafting their own content diet, there's potentially hundreds of billions of opportunities for content, as long as you don't approach it with the wrong attitude, as long as you don't want to become the next Joe Rogan or whatever, as long as you appreciate that you aren't going to be getting millions of followers, and you switch it that way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it. There's a sense of, it's like people who want to be famous. Like someone who wants to be famous, you're just like, well, for what? Like, what the hell? And they're like, well, I just want to be a celebrity. Like, go away from those people. Run. Yeah. And to your point, like, saying you want to be Joe Rogan is very like teleological. It's very goal oriented. That's very like, his happiness could be my happiness. Yes. And per the Jack Butcher story, you had to find your own thing. And honestly, your own thing is much cooler than you doing Jack Butcher's thing, right?
Yeah.
I also, one of my weirder ideas is that the more times that humans can spend on abstractions, the better. So the more we can flit over dumb, silly shit, the better. Because what it means is that we're not spending our time shelter and food, right? We're not spending our time on, like, the higher up we can go on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the better society is doing. Yeah. So the more human beings producing podcasts, the more human beings writing blog posts, making videos, means that there's less ditch digging going on. There's less having to do these unpleasant activities that have made up so much of human history. And ultimately, I think where this leads is, there's already a lot of, like, key parts of what it means to be alive that are completely abstract, like money. Money is invented. The American dollar is worth what it is because we consensually hallucinate that it's worth this. Yeah. And, same thing with crypto and all this other stuff. But the more that human beings can spend their time, thinking about that, the better, because it means things are good.
Yeah. We won't get a more perfect way to end it at that, Cam. I really want to end it on that beautiful point that we've got. The reason we're getting more podcasts and we're getting more of this stuff is because we're all a little bit better off. I think that's a beautiful way of looking at it.
Okay. Awesome. Well, Greg, thanks for having me. And I'm just excited to watch everything you do. I like your style. And I have no idea what we'll do, but I like the idea of us collaborating on something sometime down the road, whenever we know what that is.
I think that's what's beautiful about this place we work in and around at the minute, isn't it? There's thinking about how we could work together in the future. There's always going to be opportunities. Yeah, it's been awesome chat. I reckon we'll end up having another chat like this at some point where we get even deeper into some of those esoteric and nuanced topics.
Definitely. Well, with that, Craig, I wish you good night.